Well, I'm chief economist at the CBI at the moment, and we represent businesses of all shapes and sizes across sectors in the UK. And prior to my role at the CBI, I was head of emerging markets at Oxford Economics, where I was primarily focused on the outlook in China. And before that, I spent nearly a decade at the Bank of England working on monetary policy, but also lots of international issues as well. And in my time at the CBI, I was just really struck at how important it is for individuals to build up savings if we want to improve living standards across the board. So I was really attracted by FCIT's focus on being the oldest investment trust and that important purpose of trying to provide access to individual investors to equity markets. Secondly, I was really attracted to FCIT's commitment to responsible investment. It was one of the early signatories of the UN's Responsible Investment Charter, and just cognizant of how important finance is to our transition to a net zero economy, I really wanted to help play a role with that in shaping some of the decisions that are made at board level within FCIT. Well, I think it's really important that FCIT made a clear commitment to move our overall portfolio and the carbon emissions within it to net zero by 2050 at the latest. And then working with the responsible investment team, we've looked at our overall emissions within our portfolio. And I'm pleased to say that our current emissions are below the comparable world benchmark for the investment portfolio. But what we see as important going forward is that we work with the individual companies within our portfolio to ensure not just that they have a net zero target, but that they've got credible plans to reduce those emissions. And so we work quite closely with the management teams to set out what we think is important in that transition and importantly hold them to account on that. And I think importantly, be prepared to walk away from an investment if we're not seeing the improvement in that company in reducing their emissions in line with a net zero target. But we see it as more important to engage with companies rather than trying to divest immediately away from companies that may be an important part of our transition to net zero and purely invest in green technologies. We think we need to move the whole economy as part of this transition, both in the UK, but of course around the world. Absolutely. I think all businesses have adapted. First and foremost, throughout the pandemic, we were focused on ensuring that we were providing that return for individual investors for the long term. So making sure we were using the diversification within the portfolio to provide that return for individual savers. But secondly, it was thinking about how the pandemic provided an opportunity to provide a better way of communicating with our individual shareholders. So at our annual general meeting, we were able to allow digital access to that meeting. And I think that sort of innovation will be really important as we move forward. So we've got easier ways of communicating with those individual investors. Well, I think like so many businesses, everyone's thoughts were first and foremost with the Ukraine and families implicated there in the devastation we see with the invasion. But secondly, we were thinking about our own investments in Russia and of course fully supporting the economic sanctions against Russia. And so we looked at our investment portfolio and we only had 2 listed companies listed in Russia. So that was our only exposure. It only represented 0.2% of our overall investment portfolio. But we took the decision that it was important that we divested from that as soon as possible. So we essentially, the market isn't open to sell those shares in the Russian stock exchange, but we ensured that we wrote that the overall value of that investment to zero, and we will sell it as soon as possible. But I think more broadly, what's really important is we know it's going to be a more difficult time for the world economy. We're going to see a period of higher inflation and weaker growth. And so it becomes even more important that we have a diversified portfolio and that we really focus on providing a good stable return for individual investors, and that is something we are absolutely focused on through what we know is going to be a more difficult time for the world economy.